DMS Advanced Configuration. Here I'll show you a couple of more advanced settings that we can change in a DataMiner system, typically one-off configurations. Let's take a look at that. So the DMS Advanced Configuration is more typically one-off configurations that I set up during the installation of my DataMiner system, and therefore they are typically something which are included in XML files or config files. So I'll briefly mention a couple of them. There is more information in the help on all of them and even more, but here and there in the course I mentioned certain settings that are included here in those XML or config files. First of all, be aware that whenever you're changing something on a configuration file on the file system of DataMiner, you always need to restart DataMiner. So keep that in mind. Typically those are configurations you do at the beginning of your deployment, or it has a drastic change, so it needs a restart anyhow. Typically those files are going to be located in the C Skyline DataMiner directory, or sometimes in one of the subfolders as well. And note that some of these files might need to be synchronized in your DMS. If you have multiple DataMiner systems, DataMiner agents in a cluster, then you might need to synchronize and push that file to the other DataMiner agents in your cluster. You can do that with the sync tool in the System Center. Now, which files are interesting to mention here? We have the dataminer.xml in the root folder of C Skyline DataMiner. There are an alarm socket to receive the alarms or doing polling, which is by default not open. But what I want to mention here is, for instance, the color coding. I mentioned that you can change the color coding of the DataMiner system. Warning, minor, major, critical alarm, blue, cyan, yellow and critical. If you want to change that, how can I do that? Well, you can do that over here, and you can specify for all of those alarm levels or timeout and masked and everything is in there, a specific RGB value if you want to overrule or change a color. You save it like this format in the DataMiner XML, you restart DataMiner, and the new colors will apply. What else is there? A mail server, that is something you might need to specify as well if you want your DataMiner system to be able to send emails. So you can specify there the mail server, the port, and there's more information on the login name method in the help as well. So all of these topics are nicely explained in the help as well. So there you can specify your mail server settings. DMS XML contains the DataMiner agents in my DataMiner system. Typically, I don't really need to tweak that, so I'm not going to discuss any settings on this one. The maintenance settings, here we might find certain things that, for instance, define the alarm tracking history of one specific alarm, how many history items there can be, a maximum freeze time, these kind of more small tweaks and small UI things that I can change more deep down in maintenance settings XML, you could say. Of course, things like my trend window and things like that are available in the UI. So if it's available in the UI, definitely change it through the UI, of course. The watchdog settings, the watchdog that is continuously looking if your DataMiner system is still doing the job it should do and generates runtime errors. Well, you can actually add some more actions to that as well if you want to automatically receive an email, for instance, or perform an automatic restart of your DataMiner system. That as a side note. Recycle bin, as I mentioned, has a limit of a number of files or a certain size, so you can define that size there as well, or overrule the default if you would like to do so. Also, the DataMiner system will automatically do a synchronization or check if everything is still synchronized at the middle of the night. If you want to do that on another time, you can do so by specifying an alternative time for the revision of your DataMiner sync. The SLNet config, this one contains, for instance, the port 8004 that we need for the .NET remoting communication between the client and the server. So DataMiner Cube connects to that port 8004, but also DataMiner agents underneath each other are using .NET remoting and are using that port 8004. If you want to change that to another port, you can easily do so by changing this 8004 to something else and restart DataMiner. And definitely one I want to mention as the final one is the connection settings.txt. It is located in the web pages subfolder, and this one is a very important one for connecting to a DataMiner system with Cube. If there are any firewalls or certain network restrictions between your client and your server. I mentioned in the introduction or the getting connected there that you can have the situation where you connect to your DataMiner system. It waits a little bit, you don't see the alarm color coding, it builds up the whole UI, but no alarm color coding is coming in, and after 30 seconds it suddenly says a pop-up like check your firewall settings, and it pops in and all the alarms are there and everything is color coded. Well, that is because it switches after 30 seconds waiting for events. It will automatically switch over to polling. If you have that, you should change your DataMiner agent, the server, that it will automatically suggest to all the clients that are connecting to go for that polling, so that they are not needing to check if the eventing is working, waiting 30 seconds and then switching over to polling after all. How can you do that? Well, you open up the connection settings.txt. There's a whole series of explanation in here. Those are all comments with the hash sign. And at the bottom, the only line which is interesting here is the star. Every client that connects will use the type .NET remoting and polling 0 zipped true. Polling 0 means that there won't be any polling. If you want to activate polling, you need to define a polling interval within milliseconds, for instance 1000, and then every 1000 milliseconds the client will check if there are any updates. So if you want to make all your clients connecting through polling, you just change this 0 to 500 or 1000 and they will all automatically immediately connect with the polling mechanism. Note there is a star because you could also define multiple lines with multiple masks on the IP addressing. For instance, if you want to specify a certain subnet or a certain IP to use this configuration or another configuration. So that's why you can add multiple lines with multiple stars using IP address filtering. But if you just go for star, now everything polling or not, yes or no, you can define that in there. In this case, it doesn't need a restart of your DataMiner system. So this one is an exception. As I mentioned, those are a little bit more one-off configurations, some more advanced settings that I can configure on my DataMiner system. There is also more information in the help, but I definitely wanted to make you aware of those configurations that are there and the required restart of a DataMiner agent if you change something to the files. I hope you enjoyed it. See you in the next one.